My life, my story. A life full of shadows, one girl's fight for justice. A life full of promise. A life full of hope. That was what I was supposed to have. Like every other child in my village, I was meant to grow up under the protective arms of my family, to laugh freely, to dream without fear. But instead, my life became a prison, my dreams turned to dust, and my childhood was stolen by the one person my mother trusted the most. I grew up in a small village where faith was the foundation of our lives. The church was more than just a place of worship, it was our refuge, our guiding light. And at the head of it all was Pastor Femi, a man revered by everyone, a man who carried the words of God on his lips. To the villagers, he was a prophet. To me, he was a monster. And my stepfather. I woke up to the sound of my door creaking. My heart pounded as I lay frozen under my thin blanket. I knew what was coming. I could feel his presence even before I saw his shadow stretching across my small room. Pastor Femi, the man everyone in our village worshipped, the man my mother trusted with all her heart, was here again. I shut my eyes tightly, hoping tonight would be different. But it never was. The weight of his footsteps sent chills down my spine. He whispered my name like a curse, his breath reeking of bitter cola and palm wine. I clenched my fist, wishing I could disappear. But I couldn't. I was trapped in his word, forced to carry a burden I never asked for. To the people outside, he was a saint, a holy man who led prayers and cast out demons. But inside our home, he was the devil himself. I had tried to tell my mother once. I stood before her, my voice trembling, and told her what he was doing to me. But she slapped me before I could finish. She called me a liar, a wayward girl trying to destroy a man of God. That was the day I learned that my suffering was my secret. No one would save me. No one would believe me. And so, I suffered in silence, night after night, praying to a God who never answered. I tried to tell my best friend, Adis. We sat under the big mango tree behind her house, the only place I felt safe enough to speak. I told her everything, how he would whisper lies about how God had chosen me, how he made me promise never to tell. Adis' eyes widened in shock. "We have to tell my father," she said. I wanted to believe her, to hope that someone would finally help me. But that same evening, I saw her father kneeling before Pastor Femi in church, speaking in hushed tones. When I met Adis the next day, she couldn't even look at me. The truth was clear, I was alone in this fight. The fear in her eyes told me everything. She was afraid of him too. Afraid of what he could do. The church was powerful in our village, and no one wanted to question a man of God. But I was just a child. Who would protect me? That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling more alone than ever. From that day on, I stopped talking about it. I buried my pain deep inside and carried on as if nothing was wrong. I became good at pretending, at smiling when people expected me to. But inside, I was breaking. After Adi's silence, I stopped trying to speak out. I moved through life like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, keeping my pain locked inside. At home, my mother was blind to my suffering, always praising Pastor Femi for taking care of us. At church, people greeted me with smiles, never knowing I was drowning in fear. I became an expert at hiding my pain. I smiled when I needed to. I laughed when expected. But every night, the terror returned. I prayed for escape, but no help came. Pastor Femi's words were law, and I was his prisoner. The worst part was how the village worshipped him. People would travel from far just to seek his blessings. They called him a prophet, a man sent by God. And I, the girl he tormented, had to kneel before him every Sunday and call him Father. Some nights, I would stand by the river, thinking about ending it all. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was the thought of Addis, or the faint hope that one day, I would escape. But as the years passed, that hope grew smaller and smaller. On my 18th birthday, I made a decision. I was done living in fear. I took the little money I had saved and ran away. The night was dark, but it was nothing compared to the darkness I was leaving behind. I traveled to Lagos, a city where no one knew my past. Finding shelter was hard, but I found a small group of women who had also escaped abuse. We shared stories, our pain binding us together. For the first time, I felt seen. But I knew I couldn't keep running. I had to fight back. One evening, while working at a small restaurant, I overheard a journalist, Ifeoma, speaking about investigating corrupt religious leaders. I felt a spark of hope. Could I finally tell my story? It took days to gather the courage. When I finally met Ifeoma, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I told her everything. She listened, not with pity, but with determination. She promised to help me expose the truth. The day Ifeoma's article was published, I held my breath. I knew there was no going back. The entire village was in shock. People refused to believe that their beloved pastor could be a predator. My mother disowned me, calling me a liar. But I stood firm. Then, more victims came forward. Their voices joined mine, a chorus of broken souls no longer willing to stay silent. Pastor Femi's perfect image began to crumble. The church elders tried to silence us. They threatened Ifeoma. They called us demons trying to bring down a man of God. But the evidence was too strong. More and more people spoke out. Even some church members who had once defended him started to question everything. The police finally got involved. An investigation was launched. But powerful men don't fall easily. Pastor Femi denied everything, calling me a tool of the devil. His followers attacked me, but Ifeoma and other activists stood by my side. Slowly, the walls of his power began to crack. The court hearings began, and I realized that justice would not come easily. But I refused to back down. And in the end, the truth prevailed. Pastor Femi was found guilty. He was sentenced, and though it could never erase the scars he left behind, it was a victory for every girl who had suffered in silence. My mother never forgave me. But I learned to forgive myself. And in time, I found my purpose, helping other girls who had been silenced. I had once been trapped in darkness, but now, I was the light breaking through it. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And my story was only the beginning.